Are you tired of spending your time and money chasing strategy after strategy only to discover what worked 10, 5, or even 2 years ago is not working now? Things shift fast in the online space, and if you're not keeping up, you're getting left behind. It's time for something different. Welcome to the Marketing, Media, and Money Podcast, where every single episode will be jam-packed with proven, profitable strategies, behind-the-scenes secrets, and what's working now resources from industry experts and global influencers to help you scale your business, shorten your learning curve, and stand out in a crowded, noisy marketplace. And now, your host, award-winning marketing and media strategist, and international speaker, Patty Farmer.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of the Marketing, Media, and Money Podcast. I'm looking forward to sharing another amazing industry expert with you today, and I'm really excited about our expert today, and I'm excited about our topic too, and I know you will be too. So let me tell you a little bit about our guest. What if you could determine who in your audience is your best client in 180 seconds? Well, Juliet Clark is a dynamic and sought-after speaker and podcaster who has spent the last 20 years helping authors, coaches, speakers, and small businesses all over the world build expert platforms. Juliet created a platform-building tool that assesses audience obstacles, generates leads, and qualifies leads for businesses. This simple technology can be used on social media, from the stage, at workshops to build email lists and create conversations that build long-term relationships with potential clients. So we're going to learn a little bit about that and a whole lot about lead generation. Welcome, Juliet Clark.
Thank you. It's nice to be here, Patty.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited. So let's just dive right in. So I think this is really important, talking about assessments, talking about lead generation, but most of all, talking about my favorite topic, which is relationships. And I really want to dive right into that. But before we get started, you and I both know that we don't all wake up one day and say, oh, you know what, this is what I want to do, right? It's always a journey, and there's always this aha moment. So could you take a few moments and really kind of tell us a little bit about your journey and your aha moment that got you to where you are today and doing what you love?
Yes, I'd love to, because unfortunately, when you're in the midst of it, you have no idea what's going on with it. So right out of college, I was in traditional publishing. I worked at Price Stern Sloan and HP Books. And from there, I went to Chiat Day Advertising, and I worked on the Nissan account. It was a $1 billion nationwide account. And one of the nuggets I got out of there is that every product has an avatar, even across all of the regions. So different cars are sold to different people in different regions of the country. So it was really the importance of understanding who exactly your client is. And that requires having conversations with them. We used to do what's called focus groups, and many of you older people may have experienced these. You're in a mall and somebody walks up to you with a clipboard and asks you to go in the back room and look at a movie or an ad or something like that. They don't do them much anymore, because now you'd get arrested if you did that in a mall. But that's what we used to do. So from there, I went over to Mattel Toys and worked on Barbie and Hot Wheels. And in 2007, I wrote my first book. I always wanted to write a mystery novel. And I self-published. And the first thing I realized in the self-publishing world was that they weren't doing anything that really helped authors. So my second book, I started my own publishing company. By my third book, I'd sold over 25,000 really bad mystery novels. And my friends started bringing me their books. And the things I heard over and over were that they had gone to a business workshop, and they said, I created these products and services, they're not selling. And the guru in the room said, it's because you don't have a book. So when they brought me their books, I kind of said, that's not why that stuff's not selling. And this is likely going to be another failed product for you. So I think in 2015 or 16, I took a course from a woman who had put together an assessment platform. And I looked at the way she was using it and I thought, I could do this with my authors, coaches, and speakers in a way that is a marketing research tool. So that's what we did. That's how I got to where I am today. And we actually serve more coaches and small businesses and speakers than we do authors these days.
Wow, that's really a great story, but I can really see how they go hand in hand. As somebody who has an assessment and somebody who has written books, I really can understand that those things really do go hand in hand. But just because you have a book in itself doesn't mean that you're going to be successful. It really doesn't even mean it's going to be profitable. I've written 5 books, and I have to tell you, each one of my books, I had a goal with it and a reason why I did it. But I have to say it's a good thing that my number one goal wasn't for it to make me a fortune, because it didn't do that. but it did do a lot of other things. And I think that there is money and opportunity as well. And it isn't always all about dollars. However, it really does need to go in some aspects. You need to be able to do something to do what my favorite word is, which is leverage, right? So you have to have strategy, you have to be able to leverage, and you have to be able to monetize. Those are the 3 things. So I think that is really important. I can't wait to dive into that because it really makes sense to me. And I really like the idea of doing that. So here's one of the things that I really want to ask you first about assessment marketing. So why does a bigger marketing budget not always translate to more sales? I saw that on your site and it caught my eye, kind of stopped the scroll. And I was like, oh, that's a great question. So why does a bigger marketing budget not always translate to more sales? Now, I'm in marketing, so I pretty much can understand it. But I have to tell you, I think most people think bigger budget always means more sales. And can you go a little bit into why that is not necessarily so?
It's not necessarily so, because if you don't have your avatar built, if you don't know your ideal client inside and out, which means most of the time that you need to be communicating with them on a regular basis and understand their desires and needs, then your marketing budget's just wasted.
Right, because if you're not talking to the right people at the right time, I mean, that is just, it's kind of like that across the board in a lot of things, right? I mean, Facebook ads, right? So a lot of things that you do with your marketing. So it always starts with getting your avatar correct. And I think so many times people hear this all the time and they just think it's knowing what gender they are. They think they know, they're married, they have 2 kids, but I think it is so much more than that. You really do have to go deeper than that and really know psychographics, and you really need to, and I think a lot more. I mean, for me, I think it's all about knowing what magazines do they read, what kind of cars do they like to drive. I mean, it's really like, what is a day in the life of your ideal client? But let's kind of talk about understanding your avatar and what are like the basics you absolutely need to know, and then the things that if you know are going to help you to make more money.
So you mentioned some of them: psychographics, demographics. Demographics we used a lot with our products when I was in advertising. But you need to be having actual conversations with these people, because when you do that, you'll begin to see the commonalities in the people that you are closing, the people who are the difference between interested and spending money. Because there are always a lot of people who are interesting, but will they actually pull the trigger and spend money on something? So you need to know exactly what that person is inside and out. And the only way you can do that is to actually communicate with them.
So are there some key questions? Because I always like to say, the better the questions, the better the answers. So are there some key questions when you're having conversation with people that you feel it is really important to ask?
Yeah. So with one of the things we do with the assessment that I mentioned to you earlier is, if you have a program, a product, or service, define the success principles of it, because what you think is successful about it may not be what your audience or your ideal people think is the success principle of it. And that's sort of a way to test that product. Is that really what people are interested in? Finding out what their obstacles really are. A lot of times we guess when we create. And I think that's probably the biggest thing I see out there is that we create and that's where this came into the book world, as we were writing the wrong books and really being able to communicate before you create. So asking them, what is it that is, like, I know people call this their pain points a lot, but what is their obstacle? What is holding them back? What, all of those things, getting it straight from them instead of guessing.
Yes, I think that really makes a lot of sense. And we all know that in sales, a lot of times we know what they need, but really what they're looking is to buy what they want, right? So at first they may not actually know that, but the sooner you can kind of pull that together so you're on the same page, I think that it really makes a lot of sense. So do you think that seeing patterns, right? So it's all about seeing those patterns that are going to help people who purchase to replicate and scale, right? So let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. When you do marketing research, that's what you're looking for. The answers, the feedback, and the patterns. So that's why it's so important to use a tool that will reveal those patterns. Because when you're guessing, you're not going to be able to help those people. And you just brought up such a great point about in marketing, you sell them what they want and you give them what they need. And I think a beautiful example of that is a couple weeks ago, I had 2 dating coaches come to me in the same week. And one of them talked about, I help you set good boundaries and all of the things that she does. And they were really boring. Like, nobody's ever sold you a dating program by saying, I'm going to teach you how to reevaluate your boundaries and set good boundaries with men or women or whatever. And then the other one came in and her program was called Men, Sex, and Money. And I thought, what a great name. What do you do? It was exactly the same thing, but the way she positioned it, she was giving people what they want, or she was selling people what they want, but she was actually giving them what they need.
I love that. And it is so true from somebody in the marketing space as well. I think that is really, really important. And sometimes people really get stuck on that. They get stuck on that, one, because they don't know how to articulate it. Right? 2, they feel like they need to have the client, so to speak, the ideal client, understand what it is, because they feel like if this is what I'm going to deliver and be held accountable for, I want to make sure we're all using the same words. But the reality is, it's just like what you're saying. You need to sell them what they want and give them what they need. You're the expert, right? So I think that is really, and understanding them. If you understand them, I think it's really important. And you said something that I really like that you said in there. It's really funny how you pick up a word, right? But feedback. I think feedback is so important. I think a lot of times people are afraid to ask. Right? They're like, oh, no, I don't really want any feedback. And while I do believe that it is very important to be asking the right people for feedback, right? This isn't, don't ask somebody for feedback on something if they're clearly not your person, you don't need to go ask your neighbor, your sister. Like, really, honestly, those really aren't the people. But what is the importance of feedback when you are really doing this type of thing? I mean, I think it's really, really important to know.
Well, the feedback is all important. So the core of what we do, we really have 2 audiences with my company. We have people who are just coming into the business. And those are the people who understand that the coaching industry may have, I'm going to say may or may not, have this bootstrap your way to bankruptcy business model. And so they want to get it right. So to them, they understand from the get-go that feedback is great. We also have this other audience that comes into us for the assessments that has been in business for a while, and they're almost bankrupt because they created without feedback. So when you start to get that feedback, people are telling you if you're on track or if you're not on track. And just like you said, with that big budget not translating into more sales, that latter group I just talked about has found that out the hard way. So really getting that feedback back up front is helpful, because if you're creating something, a product or a service, you don't want to get, thousands, people have even been hundreds of thousands into it before they find out there's no validation for that product. And for solopreneurs and small businesses, if you're bootstrapping, you probably haven't gone out and done the validation work that you would be required to do if you went out and raised capital.
Absolutely. That is so true. One of the things I always tell my clients, like when they come to me and they're like, okay, this is what I want to do. We're going to create this funnel or whatever the case may be that we're going to do. And then they have this whole idea and they're like, oh yes, I've been working on it. And like, they don't want to do anything till they like create the whole thing. And then when they create it and they show it to me, I'm like, okay, so, I look at that and like, I don't even see sometimes this is what they want to sell. Right. And I'm looking at it. And I'm like, well, how is that? Where are they going to go next? What, how are you going to upsell or downsell or, what are you going to do with this? Like it doesn't always make sense. And one of the things I always like to tell them is you need to sell first and then create.
Yes.
Like if you can't sell it, then why are you even creating it? I don't create anything. I have an idea. I have a concept of what I want to do, but until I know that I can sell it, creating it, once you have that idea and you get that feedback, right, and you can, the creating part's the easiest part. It takes the least amount of time once you actually have that. It's so much easier than changing it all along the way. Oh, they said this. Oh, I need to tweak this. I mean, that can become so expensive in the long run. And I think that sometimes they just get it backwards. But you also said something about a feedback loop for future products. So I have to tell you, feedback's really important. I've never quite heard the phrase feedback loop though. So let's kind of talk a little bit about that. Can you explain what for you a feedback loop is?
So a feedback loop is kind of twofold. It's the people that are coming in to your programs and services, and then it's the people who've been in it. And a lot of times their feedback is very, very important because as Patty, you've probably seen this, the marketing world is shifting so fast right now. It's literally every year we're doing something new because our clientele is exhausted. They kind of caught on to the old funnels. They've kind of caught on to different things that we've done with clicks. So when you're listening to that feedback loop, in what I call a loop in there, you actually are starting to see the roadmap from your own clients, what they're telling you they want next out of marketing. And you have the ability to also tell them what you see coming up next. So it's a way to look at the patterns in the marketplace with your own clients and with potential clients and really formulate what's coming next for people.
I love that. I hadn't heard it exactly that way. I might call that something different, but I really do love that. So what would your advice be to a brand new entrepreneur, or maybe it's somebody that's transitioning out of corporate to being an entrepreneur, right? Or even a small business owner. So somebody in that space, and they're like, you know what? I really think that what you're saying makes sense to me. How would I go around about this first? Like, what would your advice be to them first?
I think outline whatever product and service that you want to sell. Look at what are the success principles? What is it that you bring that nobody else is bringing? That means taking a deep dive into your competition, which I don't think a lot of people are doing very well. And what sets you apart, and then creating an assessment and going out and talking about it and getting feedback. You may find out that what's important to you in your process isn't what is important to other people. And the other thing that does for you is when you're out talking to people, you have to remember at the end of the day, people are buying you most of the time. I may do exactly the same thing that Patty does, but Patty has a different personality. She has a different way of approaching people than I do. And so even though it's very similar, if I did something very similar to Patty, they're going to go with the person that resonates with them. So understand that you're testing your product, but you're testing yourself as well. Do people want to work with you? And really go out and find that out before you go out and build a big funnel, before you go out and invest in, a book coach and a program coach and all of those things that I think contribute to that bootstrap your way to bankruptcy business model the coaching world has. Validate first and build from there.
I really agree with you there. I always like to tell people all the time, you're not trying to reinvent ice cream. You're just coming up with your own flavor. But some people are really, really sure that they don't want vanilla or butter pecan and they want another flavor. So they're looking at for the flavor that works for them. And I have to tell you, when I first became a speaker 8 years ago, I really realized that. And it came home to me very quickly that, I wanted to be a great speaker. And so, I started, asking a lot of questions, watching a lot of people. I really wanted to learn how to do it really, really well. I hired a speech coach. And one of the things I realized is I kept thinking to myself, oh, I'm not eloquent enough. I remember I used to say that to my mom all the time. I don't feel like I'm eloquent enough. I don't know how to pick a pregnant pause and make 3 points and all this kind of stuff. And so it weighed heavy on me a lot. And then all of a sudden I was at this event and I realized that it wasn't changing me. It was just speaking in front of audiences who needed to hear it the way I said it. And once that came home to me, that was like the biggest thing for me. And I found that that applied to every single thing that I did, right? You can't say the right thing to the wrong person. You can't say the wrong thing to the right person, right? You just really need to find your people. And that's where that relationships that we were talking about earlier really comes into play there. I have built my whole business on building relationships. And so I think that in these times, it's really the currency and the environment that we have right now. But we also talked about obstacles, right? And sometimes we get in our own way, right? So what was the biggest obstacle, blind spot, or roadblock that you had to overcome?
That is such a great question. I think kind of following the herd instead of my intuition. I actually was a part of a coaching program, and my coach kept saying to me, you can't tell people it's hard. You can't tell people that. You can't be an action taker, smart aleck. People want soft. And I got really frustrated with that because that's not me. And so I quit the program. I put out, no BS, because that's what I am. And my business actually took off. I was so busy trying to be what this coach wanted to model me into that I wasn't being me. And people hire me because of me. They want action. They want to know that somebody's going to be saying, we need to get this done. I don't care what's going on in your life. We need to get this done if you want to be successful. And that's really the core of why people hire me. I'm very direct. You always know where you stand with me. And I'm sort of a smart aleck in my talks, which, either you like or you don't like. And if you don't like it, you're not my people.
I totally agree with that. I know for me, people tell me all the time, it's like, listen when people tell you, right? They're like, you know what we love about you, Patty? We love that you are so loving and giving. You'll cry with us. You'll laugh with us. But man, you are going to hold our feet to the fire though. No BS. You're going to call us out. I actually have a clause in my contracts that actually after they sign their contract, there's a little clause down there where I make them initial too, that they give me permission to do that. And sometimes, only a few times have I ever had to say, that clause you signed? And they're like, oh, you're calling me out. But the bottom line is sometimes we do get caught up in that, right? And I know that for me, if I'm paying somebody, I don't want to pay someone to ask me questions and wait for me to figure out. If you've got it, tell me. If that's not it, I'll know that's not it. But hey, if I'm missing it, sometimes we do stand in our own way and somebody does have to call us out. I love that actually. But then, for me, I always like to there is a little bit softer side of me as well. It's really kind of funny. There's a little bit softer side of me in that aspect too, about being very loving about it. But I don't know how I balance both of those actually, but it is, both of those sides are me at different times when they need to be. But I think that maybe, to be totally honest, that comes because I have 6 daughters, and raising 6 daughters, I just think that I have learned when the right time is to be which thing. So I don't know, maybe that actually is a little bit of that. So I have another question for you that it's a question that people ask a lot, but I have my own twist on it, right? So the question that gets asked a lot, I think, is if you could have lunch with any CEO, who would it be? But here's my twist. I do want to know who it is, But I think the most important thing is, what's the number one burning question you'd want to ask them? I think that's what really tells it. It's not just that who do you want to sit down with, but what would you ask them? I mean, because really, honestly, I think that is important. A lot of times people will say to me, oh, Patty, that's a good question. Who is it for you? And I always say that it's Oprah. And I get Oprah a lot. People say Oprah a lot to this question, but my question is always different than most people. What I want to know is, how was she able to manage the friendship she had with Gail when at one time she was so much more successful? And you know that she kind of brought her friend up, but Gail's very, very successful in her own right. And I think managing that friendship they had could not have been easy at times. And so I would really love to know that question. So what about you?
I think Richard Branson. I would love to sit down and find out, and maybe this wasn't always like this for him, but how did he build this empire and create the lifestyle that it looks like he loves? So I would think there would be such a delicate balance with that, having such large corporation, building it from the ground up, and still managing to, have the freedom that he has. So.
Oh, I think that is a good question. I'd like to know the answer to that too. So that's really good.
Well,
so
maybe he'll invite us out to Necker Island and share with us.
Maybe he would. So let's go back to the assessments. So I understand what an assessment is. Like I said, I actually have one myself. And I took yours too, by the way, and I loved it. So it's really great. And we're going to talk a little bit about that in a few minutes. But what does an assessment, how can that help you discover what your prospects need and provide them with content that builds value and trust? So how does an assessment do that?
So the way we lay these out, as opposed to other companies, you've probably seen some with Typeform and Jotform, is the marketing researcher in me just happens to know that anytime you ask a yes/no question, people answer it and they move on. What the assessment does when you take the success principles of what you teach and make 0, you haven't done this, and 10, you're very successful at it, is it allows people to take a deep dive into where they're really at. So let's give you an example. I have someone who is a paid speaker who teaches other paid speakers how to become one. And so as they're going through his assessment, they can clearly see as they answer those questions on a scale of 1 to 10, that if they're hitting 4s, 5s, 6s, there's something in that statement that they're not doing to get to the success principles. And I think for a lot of people, that's a point where they have to decide, how bad do I want this? So that's what we're really looking for from the taker side. I kind of digress there. From the side of the entrepreneur, this is where I think this is really smart. We have had this lead magnet paradigm for 10, 15 years online, where I give you a piece of my genius and you give me an email address. This is actually something where you start to see the patterns in what the answers are when people are taking this over and over. And for me, like you did really well because you know how to market. But for me, the funnels and follow-up and the enrollment conversation are the pieces in my assessment that people consistently don't do well with. I have a podcast called Promote, Profit, Publish. So I address those places where I see that people are consistently failing over in those to give them nuggets of information.
I see. I like it. And I also feel like, I know for me that a couple of the places that I really like using an assessment is from the stage. Like I do my own events, right? So I do 4 events a year myself. And so I really find that when I do the assessment and send it out before an event, it really helps me and actually helps the speakers that I bring in know more about the audience before they even get there. So that helps them to tailor their offers, maybe their case studies and their stories, right? Because you actually then can kind of know who is in the room.
It does, but it's even bigger than that. So I have several paid speakers who use this tool, and a lot of times when you're a paid speaker, the host is glad to send it out. They actually before were flying in and flying out because they were a keynote, or they stayed for maybe a half a day. I've had several of them that send it out in pre-marketing. Their team actually picks up the phone and says, hey, you know what, Dan's going to be there on this date, and we saw that you had a high commitment score. Would you like to sit down and talk to him for 30 minutes? So what you and I were talking about earlier, the relationship building, instead of flying in and out and hoping that somebody in your team will reach out, this is an opportunity for that credible person in the room, and the person who's invited you to speak has lent to your credibility, that you're actually willing to sit down and build a relationship with these people. And we have some paid speakers who, one of them did that at a huge event and sold 4 times what she'd ever sold before. And so now she kind of sticks around and builds relationships instead of flying in and out.
I love that. It's something that I've always done, because really that's what it's really all about. And like I said earlier, I have always built my business on building relationships. But I just believe that, it doesn't really matter what you're selling, right? The bottom line is the more information that you have, the better you're going to be at it. I mean, like, you really honestly can't tell somebody that you have a solution if you really don't even know what the problem is. And you can't really figure out what the problem is if you never have a conversation. So you can assume, but you really don't know. And the more you can delve into that, the better that information is going to be, so that you're a little bit more clear in what you can offer them if you have a solution. And, there are some times that you'll talk to somebody, you realize you don't have that solution, and then you can refer them to somebody who does, so that you are serving them, right? So it doesn't really matter across the board, but you're offering them the right thing. I mean, how many times, have you, a lot of times early on in my career, people would tell me that they wanted to hire me for XYZ. Then we'd get into the program and we'd pivot, because we realized that, yes, that's what this is about knowing, sell them what they want, but give them what they need. And then you realize that you told them that you could do that in, say, 3 months. And the reality really was that you needed more time, because they really wanted that, but they weren't really ready yet for that. And you didn't ask good enough questions. I learned that quickly 20 years ago. And so I think that really, honestly, you don't jump in as quick. So I can really see how an assessment really can help you. I also use my assessment as an onboarding process for my clients too. It gives me a baseline of where they're at. So I know, really kind of what kind of action plan we need to have for them. I think that an assessment can help you in so many ways. And I think people don't really realize it. I mean, there have been surveys, but there's a difference. So, in your words, what is the difference between, sending somebody a survey and actually really sending them an assessment?
So people hate surveys, by the way. I know you probably know that. So a survey is usually sent out so that it helps the entrepreneur. And people get tired of filling them out because there's nothing in it for them. When you put an assessment together and you position it as something that's going to help them identify where they're at in their process, then there's something in it for them. And I rarely even share, I never share when I'm giving it to an audience that there's a ton in it for me, which is what I like about this, using this versus a lead magnet, is that a lead magnet, it's pretty much, I'm going to give you my genius, you're going to give me your email address, then you're never going to open the email, probably never open the thing I just sent you. And so it's not really an even exchange. The assessment is truly an even exchange, because you're serving the person, helping them understand where they're at, but you're also getting a ton of information to help you build your business better as well. So I think in that sense, there really is a true exchange of information there.
I agree with you 100%. I always like to say that when they fill the assessment out, when they do the assessment, whether they ever speak to me ever again, they're going to know more about their business and really be able to know what their next steps should be, no matter what. I mean, like, really, honestly, if they never speak to you again, not to say they would, but if they never speak to you again, there is something in it for them. And really, how often does that happen? Right? I mean, like you said, in a survey, they're just giving information. It's like data driven, right? So not to say that in the world that we're in, we need data, we want data, and it helps us a lot to fine tune things. But I really love to give people value. And so I think that it is a way that you really can serve them above and beyond just a lead magnet, right? Because we all know that a lead magnet really is just kind of like a little bit of a taste that leads them to the next thing. And while I do believe that we do people a disservice if we teach them something from the stage and then we don't give them anything to do next, well, that's kind of a disservice for them. But I really believe that an assessment will give them so much more information that they may not even realize about themselves and their business, that I think it actually gives them more information so they can make a more intelligent decision themselves.
I agree with that. And at events, you've probably noticed that people are no longer falling for, here are $20,000 worth of bonuses and run to the back of the room. People have really become very thoughtful about that. And I know the one mastermind that I'm in, I actually walked to the back of the room, and that gentleman is one of my clients now. And I said, he didn't do the whole bonus thing. He said, this is what the program's about. This is how much it is. You're going to know if it's for you or not. Come talk to us. I went back and I talked to them and I said, is this going to be available if I decide in 2 or 3 months at the same price? And they're like, absolutely. You can come in anytime and it's still the same price. And so they did this really soft sell. And I have to tell you, he said he sold more than he ever had before. And it's because he didn't do all the hype at the back of the room. So having that information out there for those people was really helpful for them to make a decision, and a decision that was thoughtful. Because Patty, I bet you've done this where you've joined a coaching program and then 3 or 4 months into it, you're like, ugh, why did I do this? I should have investigated this more. I should have, So it really allows people to make thoughtful decisions, which I think builds better relationships and better referrals as well.
And it's better for them, but it's also better for you. Who wants to have a client that's like, when you're like, oh, I should have said no. I shouldn't have taken them on as a client. And that happened early on once or twice too, before I really got really good at knowing exactly who my client is. And I like to live my life with joy, and I only take on clients. So a lot of times I think people think, oh, we're trying to see if you're the right fit. But the reality is, I'm looking to see if you're the right fit for me just as much as you are. And are we the right fit for each other? And I think that's where the magic really happens. But I really do agree with you. One time I hadn't thought of this in a long time, but I went to this event once, and this girl, she actually told us afterwards that when she decided to do it, she knew that it was either going to go over really good or it was going to bomb. And so I really was proud of her for really feeling like she wanted to do it, and she did it anyway. I loved it. And basically what she did was she told everybody day one, like the first half hour of the 3-day event, she said, I know that when I go to events, I spend the whole event wondering, what are they going to sell me and how much is it going to be? So I'm going to tell you right up front, this is what it is, and this is what the price is. And then I'm going to spend the rest of the event, showing you why it might be the thing that you need in your business. And I thought that took guts, because it was against what everybody was doing. And I was like, go you. I absolutely love that, because it's true. You do think that, oh, what is it going to be? And you go through this whole thing. And the reality was that's exactly what she did. She told us, and then the rest of the time, she just kind of laid it out so you could clearly make a decision. Here's what it is. Here's what the price is. You had all that time to think about it, not make that impulse decision, right? And I actually think that, we need to disrupt the marketplace. What has worked before doesn't work now. I mean, as a matter of fact, we're on the Marketing, Media, Money podcast, but that is the whole premise for the podcast and the magazine, which really is that what worked 10 years ago, 5 years ago, and 2 years ago is not what is working now. And that's why everybody I have on the show or writes for the magazine, like you, I want them to come on here and share with the audience what's working now, because that's what's important. what is working now. So I really love that you shared this great information with us on what's working now, because I think there's a lot of people out there that are not using assessments, and it could be the tool and the answer that they're looking for. So Juliet, what do you love about your business today? Like, what is the thing you're loving about your business right now?
What I love about my business right now is I've moved a little bit more out of coaching and more into building for bigger companies and for still the smaller companies. But I feel like I have more freedom because I'm in and out quickly in the project. So I'm really loving
that.
I know. I almost feel bored sometimes. Like, whoa, I don't have a calendar full of people to coach today.
I know, but I think that could sometimes be a good thing. You know, I know for me that time freedom is very, very important to me. It is my motivator for sure. And it's my why. So I think that knowing that you get to shift, I think that's a beautiful thing. So Juliet, how can people connect with you?
You can go over and take one of our quizzes, www.leadlogicquiz.com. And, you'll get the connection there, or go over to superbrandpublishing.com. And especially if you're a book person, and you can find out more about books and assessment marketing there.
Perfect. So Juliet, here's the part of the show that we like to call Open Mic, where I pass the mic over to you and ask you to share your number one marketing, media, or money strategy with the audience.
Don't rely entirely on digital. A click is not a relationship. And in order to be able to sell, you need to build real relationships with real people. And at the end of the day, people aren't going to buy on a click. They're going to buy you. They're going to buy what you have. And in order to do that, they need to have some real conversations with you about who you are, how you work, trust, and understanding that you are the person that will take them to the next level. And that doesn't happen with a click or even 5 clicks.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Thank you so much, Juliet, for being here with us today and for sharing your brilliance so generously. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, everyone, thank you so much for listening to the Marketing, Media, Money podcast today. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, subscribe, and review the podcast on your favorite listening platform. And make sure to join us on Facebook in the Marketing, Media, Money magazine podcast and event Facebook group. We will see you again very, very soon. Make it a phenomenal day. And remember, if it's not, you have the power to change it.
Thank you for joining us today on the Marketing, Media, and Money podcast. To shorten your learning curve even more, make sure to grab your free copy of the Marketing, Media, and Money magazine at www.marketingmediamoney.com. I promise your business will thank you.